Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this special coverage following up on the latest updates on the Iranian or the American-Israeli-Iranian war. And we are delighted to be joined over the phone by Dr. Sara, the political analyst. We will talk to her about the latest updates and US President Donald Trump's threats to Iran that a whole civilization will die tonight if Iran fails to meet his latest deadline to strike a deal that includes reopening the Strait of Hormuz. We are now having Dr. Sara, the political analyst. Good evening, doctor.
Good evening, madam, and to all your audience.
It's a pleasure having you this on Nile TV International. So, doctor, how do you see Trump's threat that the whole civilization will die tonight if Iran fails to meet his latest deadline to strike a deal that includes reopening the Strait of Hormuz, while Iran urged young people to form human chains around power plants and other potential targets?
Okay, that's of course an unneeded escalation because of the lack of diplomacy, again. And again, Mr. Trump is trying to impose peace or a relief to the world because of the economic consequence, of course, negative consequence of the war. That's why he's pressuring Iran to take off the Strait of Hormuz as a point of pressure on the U.S., because the whole world is pressuring the U.S. now to stop the war against Iran because of the economic consequence, because of the closure of Strait of Hormuz. But the thing is, again, we have another conflict, which is setting the deadline for Iran to respond. Well, there is some green flags that Iran accepts talking to Pakistan about a 2-week ceasefire. Fine, ceasefire. Still, Strait of Hormuz is out of question for Iran. So why pressure the whole world again and put himself in such a situation where he gets to either do what America threatens to do and set the whole world on fire, or now actually he's throwing the ball into Iran because, okay, and Iran, of course, is playing back. They would say ceasefire, and then again, the whole world is facing the negative consequence because the Strait of Hormuz is out of question still for Iran.
So you mentioned Pakistan's efforts, doctor, and urging Trump to accept a 2 weeks ceasefire and urging Iran as well to accept a ceasefire. What are the expected scenarios from your own point of view?
Well, actually now Iran is giving good signals that they are talking to Pakistan as we're speaking. Now the whole world is actually on tiptoes waiting for this war, for another discourse in this war, either to an ultimate escalation or to a hope of negotiations. If we talk about ceasefire for 2 weeks and then maybe an economic relief happens to the world if the Strait of Hormuz gets opened again. But Iran insists on not opening the Strait of Hormuz as a choking point to the whole economy of the world and on the U.S., of course, because that has caused a lot of movement inside the U.S. itself, because prices are getting higher and higher even for the U.S. itself. So, again, if we get back to diplomacy into one hope of negotiating ceasefire, maybe in 2 weeks we would have a relief. But if it goes escalating as this, well, actually we will talk about complete darkness as they are threatening. And hopefully we don't get there. Hopefully mediators like Pakistan and Egypt and Turkey reach an understanding between the U.S. and Iran, for now at least.
How do you see the failure of the UN Security Council vote vetoed by China?
This comes as a consequence of U.S. practices. The U.S. has been taking the stage, the international society's stage, for a decade, doing solo actions, starting from invading Iraq and Pakistan, reaching out to Gaza. So I guess Russia and China are paying back now. So it's a push against this kind of practices by the U.S. in the world, which is imposing peace by power. It's Russia and China as a new polar in the world are telling the U.S. to back off from its practices in the international society. So it's very important, especially that it didn't come only from Russia or only from China. We're talking about two opposing power to another superpower. Now we're talking about clashes between superpowers in the UN Security Council and the ongoing and the upstanding world order that we know that the U.S. has founded. So it's being defied today, but the same system that the U.S. has founded after World War II. So we have the U.S. actually breaching international law today, and maybe Russia and China are reminding the U.S. back of international law.
So Dr. Pope Leo XIV said on Tuesday that threats against the population of Iran are unacceptable in an unusual appeal hours after U.S. President Donald Trump said a whole civilization will die tonight in a social media post that shocked world leaders. How do you see the world's reaction towards Trump's threats?
I'm sorry, but no one in the whole world believes Mr. Trump anymore. Especially that the lies are becoming clearer and clearer and clearer each day. Mr. Trump says that the Iranian people are seeking freedom while threatening their whole existence. So it makes no sense today in this modern world, in this world order we're witnessing a change in that he tells lies like this. So nobody believes Mr. Trump anymore, and he just keeps on putting the U.S., the whole world, and himself in such situations, making the whole world stand tiptoes waiting for another decision in escalation in this war. And actually, of course, the whole world has had enough with such practices. And everyone would actually desire and hope for a second chance for diplomacy, please, so we can give the whole world a relief from such violence.
Doctor, how do you assess Iran's warning to neighboring countries that it could disrupt oil and gas supplies for these countries for years?
Of course, it's unacceptable, but we are in a war state now. Of course, it's unacceptable, but in Iran's philosophy that we might see closer now, having the U.S. Starting their war bombing a school, just another practice that Israel does in Gaza. So it actually gives the U.S. no excuse to even support their vision in changing the Iran's regime. Everyone now sees that Iran has the right to defend itself and so on. Of course, Iran's practices are unacceptable, especially that it will stay neighbors with the Arab countries forever. Either they have a regime change or not. That kind of hostilities against Arab words will never be forgotten. But in Iran's philosophy, of course, it is attacking all the U.S. interests in the area where it has more allies. And that's what has Iran been used for against the whole Arab nation in the past few decades since this regime in Iran came. So today we're witnessing what we were scared of decades ago that started in '79 when this regime in Iran took over. But what did the U.S. do about it but increase its hostilities against the Arabs, especially that the U.S. is supposed to be in charge of the security of this part of the world. And they have failed this part of the world with policy and military practices. So again, the kind of alliance in this area will be long talked about afterwards, after this war, And now we kind of hope of any savior exit of it before things get worse and get more violent.
So, Doctor, to what extent are you optimistic after all these warnings, threats, and escalations to get back to the negotiations table?
Well, to start with, it's not bad. The Iranian response now is not bad. It's kind of relieving, actually, to accept the 2 weeks ceasefire, or to talk to Pakistan about a 2 week ceasefire. That's a huge step forward. Let's just hope that they agree on ceasefire, and then things can get back to diplomacy consequently. But let's just hope that we manage, or mediators manage, to stop this craziness for now and the escalation, just to halt the escalation a little bit, and then we can be optimistic about negotiations. Negotiations would be the ultimate goal in such a scenario now.
So, do you expect the extension of the 2 week deadline?
Actually, that would mean that the negotiations are going okay. Hopefully, we reach that point. If we get more weeks of ceasefire, this would be a green sign, or a good sign, a positive one, that the negotiations are going okay. So hopefully, and actually the last suggestion that was offered to both the U.S. and Iran by the mediators, I guess, was to remove sanctions from Iran in exchange of halting its nuclear program. Now we have valid points that we can talk about. Before, the points were not even negotiable by the Iranian part, and were already rejected in negotiations before the start of this war that has been going on for 40 days now, or 50. Okay, so hopefully, if we get more weeks of ceasefire, that would be a great relief to the whole world that things are going onwards.
Hopefully. Thank you so much, Dr. Sara Kira, the political analyst, for your information and insight, and thank you everyone for watching.